Well, that's one of the major issues on which Rosen works as a journalist. She has a special program to teach journalists how to report accurately on mental illness. And she's had not only a wide range of journalists from all over this country, including the major networks and major newspapers, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, Seattle papers, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and also she does this in other countries. She's had programs in New Zealand and in South Africa and in Hungary and in Colombia and now in Mexico. And one of the things we talked to the Arab countries about was having a special correspondent from Al Jazeera come and enter Rosen's program. The Carter Center gives them a $10,000 a year stipend. They work on their own tasks that were occupied them before they came here, but they have to come to the Carter Center to learn the accurate facts about mental illness. And they come at their own will. Rosen have a lot of volunteers that want to come. She can be very selective. She takes, I think, about 1 out of 10 who apply. And it's very good for them because they are taught about mental illness, and then they report back to Rosen when they finally go through their training course. This is what I intend to write about this next year. And then at the end of the year, each year, they come back and give a report on what they've done. And it's surprising how sometimes they have 5 or sometimes 10 times as many articles about mental illness, and they are ostensibly correct. So she's also, when I was governor, took me out to Hollywood and up to New York to work with screenwriters for the sitcoms and other shows that are on television and in the movies to make sure that they reported them accurately and presented accurately people on the screen that have mental illness. So Rosen points out that people who have mental illness are 4 times as likely to be attacked by people who don't have mental illness as a mental health person is to attack somebody else. I think Indiana's kind of brought disgrace on themselves. I think they're going to suffer because of it. I noticed it on CNN, I think it was, that about 80% of the people in Indiana feel the same way I do about it. They think it's a mistake. But Rosen looks on mental health as one of the basic human rights, that everybody has a right to be treated properly if they have mental health, and treated properly to correct mental health problems, which is quite possible now compared to what it was when she first began working on the subject 44 years ago, as a matter of fact, when I was running for governor. She didn't know anything about mental health then, but she got a lot of questions about it. And so that's when she began to study mental health problems and try to resolve some of them. Well, I think I have to be hopeful. The Carter Center has maintained a full-time office in Jerusalem and also in Ramallah in the West Bank and also in Gaza. We have a full-time office in Gaza. I'll be going there next month, as a matter of fact, again, to look at the devastation and also try to heal the wounds that exist between Hamas and Fatah. Because we feel that unless the Palestinians can come together in some sort of agreement, that it's not going to be possible to get peace. And as you may know, last April, almost a year ago, Hamas and Fatah agreed to set up a technocrat government with no representatives that were active in politics from either side, and for Fatah leader Abu Mazen Abbas to go into Gaza and try to start rebuilding and put his imprimatur on it. He hasn't done that yet. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to the new king of Saudi Arabia about was that subject. And I asked him if he would, be responsible for bringing together the leaders of the two Palestinian factions. So I'll be going to next year with a group of people called the Elders. The Elders is a group that was established by Nelson Mandela, who was our first elder. His wife is still on it. Kofi Annan is another, Bishop Tutu, and I, and the former presidents of Brazil and Mexico and Ireland and Finland, former Prime Minister of Norway, who is also the head of the World Health Organization. That's the group that works on this, so they'll be going with me on this trip to Gaza. So not only is the Carter Center working on it, but the elders are working on that long-term healing of the wounds. I think on April the 1st, the Palestinians might very well go to the International Criminal Court. And I think they're prepared to be accused by Israel, and it'll be, I think, very healthy for both sides to bring out the facts. Well, you know, every former president is different, just like we 7 people in this room are different. And I think he'll have to decide what he wants to do himself. But when Clinton left the White House, he sent his people down to the Carter Center to see what we do. And George H.W. Bush did the same thing. George W. Bush did the same thing. So I think the Carter Center has been kind of a model that people can look at it and either copy or not. And in a way, President Clinton has copied the Carter Center model. He has programs all over the world. George W. Bush and his father both have concentrated on education of future leaders, I think, in Texas. So people do different things, but we certainly will invite Obama to send his staff down to the Carter Center to go through, in a day or two, the history of what the Carter Center has done. And I would hope that he would take on some things because he has a special status, as you know, in particular, I'd say, in African countries and other places around the world. And I think his voice would be very beneficial to the people there, just to let them know he cares about them. I think you have to be optimistic, like I said I was with the Middle East, because you want it to get better. And I think unless you're optimistic, you won't strive to make it better. And I think every human being has an obligation to see the things around him or her that are troubling and try to correct them on a local level or in a more expansive level if they get to be, you know, influential in some way by elected office. The general trend toward democracy has been favorable. In fact, the Carter Center began the process of monitoring troubled elections. And we just finished our 99th election in Tunisia. We are preparing now to go to Guyana and to Myanmar, which used to be Burma, and a couple of others in Africa. We did the first 2 elections in Indonesia when they had new democracy. So I think the trend toward democracy is favorable. We're making very good progress on doing away with some of the major health programs. The Carter Center, for instance, last year, we treated 39 million people for diseases that are characterized as neglected tropical diseases by the World Health Organization. That's about twice as many people as live in the state of Florida, and the Carter Center treated that many people. We performed about 1/3 of all the eye operations done in the world last year for trachoma and so forth. So the Carter Center has a massive health program, and we are just about ready to do away with a disease called dracunculiasis or guinea worm. We started out a few years ago with this disease in 23,600 villages, and we're down to 30 villages now. Last year we had 126 cases. So far this year we only had 1 case. So it might be the second disease ever eradicated. It's called guinea worm. And it's an indescribably horrible disease. It's probably the fiery serpent in the Bible that afflicted the Israelites when they're coming out of Egypt. And, you know, the symbol for a doctor, the staff, that's what's wrapped around it is a guinea worm. That's the only way they could treat guinea worm before the Carter Center got involved in it. They would the guinea worm takes, a year after you drink the eggs, the guinea worm gets about a yard long. And it takes 30 days to emerge from the body. It grows in the body. So a 1 yard long worm stings the inside of the skin and emerges. It takes about 30 days to emerge. And it's horribly painful. It destroys all the muscle tissue like polio did. And the only way they could treat it was to wrap it around a stick about as big as a pencil and put a little tension on it, and you could make it emerge in 20 days instead of 30 days. And then that's where the symbol for medical doctors profession is. Anyway, we're about to eradicate that disease. So Rosen works with me on everything that I've described. I think that's the last thing we need is a war with Iran. And I hope we will be successful in controlling their nuclear move. what they've done so far that's proven is completely permissible under the Non-Proliferation Act. And as you know, they have a right to enrich uranium for medical purposes and for generation of power, and that's all they've done so far. But what the main purpose of the talks are to fix it so that Iran, with inspections, could not possibly make an explosive device within a year. I think that's the latest thing that I know about it. But it would change the power balance in that region. Of course, we know that Israel has several hundred nuclear weapons and have had since I was in the White House. But I think if Iran goes nuclear, I don't have any doubt that Egypt will and Saudi Arabia will. There'll be a proliferation of nuclear states that might be subject to being taken by terrorists, and then they could use it for those purposes. And in fact, I worry most about Pakistan. Pakistan has more than 100 nuclear weapons, and they're all over Pakistan. And Pakistan is a very shaky government, and I think is more in danger of having somebody take over one of their nuclear sites. Well, first of all, the United States needs to do something for its own problems. The State Department last year are required by Congress to report, and they reported that 60,000 people in the United States now living in human bondage or slavery. And in Atlanta, where the Carter Center is located, we have between 200 and 300 people sold into slavery every month. And the trade in human beings now across international borders is much greater than ever was in the 19th century, in 1865, when the Civil War was going on. $150 billion a year. And the reason that Atlanta is, I think, the #1 trading post in the country is because we have the largest and busiest airport. And a lot of our passengers come from the southern hemisphere. And a brothel owner can buy a girl with brown or black skin for about $1,000. And they make about $35,000 on average per year per unwilling prostitute. So that goes on. We have horrible problem with sexual assault on college campuses. For instance, over 50% of all the universities and colleges in America have not reported a single case of sexual abuse, sexual assault in the last 5 years. I've been asked to speak to a lot of universities. This past December, I spoke to Harvard and Yale and Princeton, as well as other universities who have a problem, and they know it. And in the military, as reported by the Defense Department, there were 16,000 cases of sexual assault year before last data I've seen. And it's perpetuated because the Congress has refused to take away the commanding officer's right to abort any punishment for rapists. So the commander of a ship, captain of a ship, or the commander of a Marine battalion or something like that, is very reluctant to admit that he has or she has, sexual harassment going on. So they just don't permit any punishment. So we have a lot of problems, and I hope that we could pass someday some of the legislation that I advocated in the last chapter of my book in the United States to make it mandatory for the United States to have that as a test case on dealing with other countries. The United Nations has passed resolutions against it. But for instance, we have a lot of programs in Egypt. 90% of all the females living in Egypt now have had their sexual organs mutilated. And the worst statistic I can give you is that at this moment, there are 160 million females missing from the face of the earth who ought to be living, who were strangled by their parents at birth, or who were aborted when the family found that the fetus was going to be female. China has 118 boys for every 100 girls. What happened to the other girls? India has 112 boys for every 100 girls. And so, in the poorest families on earth, those two governments require small families. But in the poorest countries on earth, the parents just get rid of girls because they can't afford so many children. So those things go on, and that'll be one of the major efforts of me and Rose and the rest of our lives, is to try to end some of those abuses. I think the progress that's been made since she first got involved, when everybody was housed in major mental institutions. We had 12,000 patients in Milledgeville, state institution, and now there was no thought then that they could be cured and live a good life. Now there is just about everybody that has mental illness with proper treatment can live a basically normal life. And that's one of the big achievements that's happened in the last 40 years. Also now, the more advanced elements of mental health are concentrating on prevention of mental illness, not just treatment, which can be successful. And so that's another area. Another thing that Rose is working on is the early detection of potential mental illness in little children. There are tests now that can be done to show if a little child is going to be badly mentally ill, and with proper treatment. When they're children, they never will develop a serious mental illness. So those are the kind of things. I would say successful treatment, prevention, and then turning to early detection and giving your child a chance to live without ever experiencing mental illness that needs to be treated. I think there's no doubt that this life, since the White House has been the best we've ever had.